Loan denied, you lack stable income. He let the line die, thumbed end, and dropped the phone onto the warm concrete step. The evening heat of Atlanta pressed his shirt to his back, glue streaked his forearms, a grit of sawdust clung to his knuckles. In the backpack at his feet, 2 handmade sneakers, a paper notebook with model names, a scrap of canvas that still smelled like the hardware aisle. Down the block, a dumpster lid slammed. Across the street, a van with the logo of the fashion brand that once lifted his sketch idled like a dare. His phone buzzed. Unknown, you really think we won't find you? 3 days. He didn't finish the message before the screen dimmed. The dread wasn't about the bank or the money, it was about Taya. She was supposed to grab the contracts from his garage and vanished, taking his laptop, the only flash drive with the new line, and the one accelerator term sheet that could change everything. He'd reread her last post 100 times, you should do this alone. He just couldn't tell if it was a blessing, a warning, or a goodbye. Back at the garage, the air felt colder than the thermometer. Someone had taped a note above the door, letters cut from a magazine, don't dig a hole you can't climb out of. He peeled it free and smiled anyway, because the alternative was folding. Inside, the bench lights hummed to life. On the table, a pair of busted work boots from a shelter client who'd said, if these hold a week on site, I'll tell everyone. Day 3, the soul had split. Day 5, the man left a voicemail, no hard feelings, just don't stop. The failure sat there like a brick, and somehow, like a promise. Another text, different number, prototype in 7 days. If it works, we wire funds. He had no idea if the sender was legit or another setup, but deadlines were good oxygen. He yanked the canvas roll Taya had rescued from a scrap bin, traced a pattern over it, then paused. The design wasn't the problem, supply and credibility were. He needed a soul that wouldn't quit, a story that wasn't pity, and proof in a city that measured belief in purchase orders. The garage door clattered. He spun. It was only Jamal from next door, a barber with a key edge and a soft voice. Cops asked about your plates, Jamal said, nodding toward the van out front. Also, there's a woman in a blue hoodie posted 2 houses down. Been there an hour. He handed over a folded flyer, pop-up vendor night, Old 4th Ward, tomorrow. Cash buyers. Bring product. Jamal tapped the shoes. You sell 3 pairs there, you'll sell 30 next week. You sell none, change the design by Monday. He cut the canvas, stitched the quarters, punched the eyelets, burned the ends of the laces, then ripped the tongue off and did it again. Midnight. His phone flashed, unknown, we saw your van. Stop hiding. He killed the garage light, listened, footsteps. A car door? And turned the light back on. Work was the only lock he trusted. By 2 a.m. A prototype sat on the table, cheap fabric, stubborn shape, a sole layered from reclaimed gym mats. Ugly. Honest. He slid it on, jumped twice, then sprinted the length of the driveway until his lungs burned. The heel held. He filmed a 10-second clip, no face, just pavement and the shoe surviving a curb stomp, and posted it to a dead social account with a new name, Ground Up Shoes. 10 minutes later, a comment from an account he didn't recognize, if you built these, DM. I buy for shelters. 10 minutes after that, a second comment, you stole that line from Taya's pitch. His chest tightened. He typed, deleted, typed again, stopped. If she'd pitched it, where? To whom? And why had she left the keys? Sun edged the garage door. He wiped glue off his palms and stared at the note with cut-out letters. He should call the bank. He should call the number promising funds. He should call Taya. He did none of that. He opened his notebook and wrote 3 lines instead, 7 days. 3 pairs. One story no one can fake. Then he circled pop-up vendor night until the paper tore, laced the prototype on his left foot and the old failure on his right, and stepped into the heat to see who would try to stop him first, the bank, the brand, the ghost with his sketches, or the part of him that still flinched when a door opened. Rain came without warning, smashing against the thin metal roof of the garage like fists on a locked door. Eli bent over the bench, pulling a stitch tight on the left shoe when the garage door banged open so violently the hinges squealed. He dropped the awl, heart thudding. It wasn't Taya. A man stood there in a drenched leather jacket, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes scanning the space as if he already knew every corner. He stepped in, boots squelching. "You're late," the stranger said, voice flat, and tossed a thick brown envelope onto the bench. The sound it made was wrong, too heavy for paper alone. Eli didn't move to open it. He had a pretty good idea who sent it, and none of the possibilities were good. The man didn't sit, didn't blink. 3 days, he said, then glanced at the wall clock. No extensions. With that, he turned and walked back into the rain, leaving wet footprints like a trail Eli didn't want to follow. The envelope sat there, daring him. His hands hovered, then he shoved it into a drawer instead. If he opened it now, he'd lose the last thread of focus he had. He needed to finish the prototype. He needed something to take to the pop-up vendor night tomorrow, something that proved he still had a reason to be here. His phone buzzed. "Unknown, she's not who you think she is." He froze. His stomach clenched so tight it hurt. Taya's face flashed in his mind, that sharp half-smile, the way she leaned on the workbench like she owned it, the quiet, "I'll fix everything," before she vanished with his laptop and designs. He told himself it didn't matter, that people leave. But strangers didn't send warnings about people who didn't matter. The rain thickened, hammering so loud he almost missed another sound, the faint crunch of gravel outside, too steady to be random. He killed the bench light, waited. A shadow moved past the frosted garage window. His pulse spiked. The van with the stolen logo brand had been parked across the street earlier. Was it still there? He didn't check. Instead, he slid the finished shoe into a battered box, grabbed his keys, and stepped into the downpour. The street felt different, quieter, as if the city itself was watching. He turned the corner and nearly collided with Jamal, his neighbor, holding an umbrella like a shield. "Cops asked about your plates," Jamal said without preamble. "Also, a woman in a blue hoodie's been standing 2 houses down. Hour straight." He handed Eli a folded flyer, "Pop-up vendor night, Old 4th Ward, cash buyers, bring product." Jamal's tone sharpened. "Sell 3 pairs there, you'll sell 30 next week. Sell none? Change the design by Monday." Eli nodded, but his head was somewhere else. Blue hoodie, 3 days, strangers who knew too much. Back inside, he cut another piece of canvas, stitched until the skin on his fingers burned. At midnight, the phone buzzed again. "We saw your van. Stop hiding." He swallowed, switched on the light instead of off. If they wanted to see him, let them see him working. By 2 a.m., the second prototype sat on the bench, ugly, stubborn, stitched from scrap but built to survive. He laced one on, left the other boot as a reminder of failure, and sprinted the driveway in the rain until the sole gripped like it meant it. Back inside, he filmed a 10-second clip, no face, just pavement and the shoe stomping a curb, and posted it to a dormant account under a new name, Ground Up Shoes. 10 minutes later, a comment, "If you built these, DM. I buy for shelters." 10 minutes after that, "You stole that line from Taya's pitch." Eli just stared at the screen, the rain still pounding. If she'd pitched it, where? And why hadn't she told him? "I didn't sleep." He sat in the garage's single folding chair, scrolling through the 2 comments over and over until the words blurred. The first one, shelters, was a door he couldn't afford to ignore. The second, Taya's pitch, was a knife he couldn't pull out. Somewhere, she was alive, moving, maybe working the same dream he thought was theirs. Or maybe she'd been working it alone all along. By sunrise, the rain had stopped, but the street felt heavier. The blue hoodie woman Jamal had mentioned was gone. In her place, a scrap of paper wedged into the garage door, 2 days now. No signature. No clue. He crumpled it, tossed it into the bin, and missed. It lay on the floor like it wanted to be read again. The day moved fast. Eli borrowed Jamal's car, the van was too recognizable, and drove to a strip mall on the edge of Old Fourth Ward to pick up more scrap material. The cashier handed him the bag and slid something else across the counter, a folded Polaroid. His breath hitched. Taya. Standing in front of a conference backdrop, wearing a blazer he'd never seen, smiling like the world was hers. A sponsor logo behind her, the same brand that had stolen his designs years ago. On the back, a phone number. No name. He shoved it in his pocket and kept moving. Pop-up vendor night was in less than 12 hours, and he had 3 pairs to finish. Every stitch felt like it cost him more than time. At 5 p.m., his phone rang, another unknown number. He almost ignored it, then answered on instinct. A voice, low and calm, "If you sell tonight, take cash only. Don't let anyone scan your products. They're looking for you." The line went dead. By the time the sun dipped, the neighborhood market was alive, lights strung overhead, music thumping, the air thick with food and money changing hands. Eli set up his small folding table, 3 boxes stacked, no banner, no brand name. Just the shoes. Within minutes, a young guy in a suit stopped, lifted a pair, nodded. How much? Eli named a price lower than he wanted but high enough to hurt. The guy paid in cash. First sale. The second came from a woman who didn't even try them on, she just looked at the soles, smiled, and handed him double what he'd asked. "You'll need this," she said, eyes lingering like she knew something. Halfway through the night, he saw her. Blue hoodie. Standing across the lot, not browsing, not talking. Watching. The air seemed to shrink between them. He thought of the envelope in his drawer, the Polaroid in his pocket, the texts that didn't stop. But he didn't move toward her. Not yet. Because in that same moment, another figure stepped into the lights, leather jacket, rain still dripping from the hem like it had been following him all day. And when the man's eyes found Eli's table, there was no doubt, this was not a customer. The man in the leather jacket didn't bother weaving through the crowd, he walked in a straight line, like everyone else would just move. And they did. Eli's pulse quickened, but his hand stayed on the table, fingers resting on the shoebox like it was a lifeline. The jacket stopped a foot away. Rainwater dripped onto the cardboard. "You brought them," he said, low enough for Eli to wonder if he was talking about the shoes or something else entirely. Eli didn't answer. He'd learned that silence could be a shield. The man glanced at the blue hoodie woman across the lot, then back at him. Interesting choice of company. Before Eli could ask, the man slid a folded sheet from his pocket and tucked it under the top shoebox. Midnight. Same garage. Or the next message won't be on paper. Then he turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving the scent of rain and leather in his wake. Eli kept working. 2 more sales, one to a teenager who couldn't stop bouncing on his toes, the other to an older guy who paid with coins like each one mattered. But his eyes kept finding the blue hoodie. She never moved closer, never left. And every time he looked away, he swore she was angled just slightly different, always keeping a clean line of sight. The market wound down. Lights dimmed, vendors packed up. When Eli looked again, the hoodie was gone. The empty space she'd stood in felt louder than the music fading out. He loaded the remaining box into Jamal's trunk, drove home the long way, checking mirrors more than the road. Back at the garage, the folded sheet sat on the workbench where he'd dropped it. Not an address. Not instructions. Just a photo, grainy, taken from across the street. Him and Taya, side by side at a bus stop 6 months ago. Both laughing. On the back, 2 words, she chose. Sleep was impossible. He spent the night pacing, stitching a 4th pair without realizing it, replaying every conversation he'd ever had with her. She chose. Chose what? Him? Them? Someone else? Or something bigger? The photo didn't answer, it only split the questions wider. At 11:58, headlights flashed across the garage wall. Not the leather jacket, a different car. Black, windows tinted. Eli's chest tightened. The engine idled for a full minute before the passenger door opened. A figure stepped out, hood up, face shadowed. She moved like she'd been here before, feet finding the cracks in the driveway. Taya, he said before he could stop himself. The hood came down. It wasn't her. But the woman's first words made the air drop 10 degrees. I know why she left. And I know what's in the envelope. Her voice was steady, but her eyes wouldn't meet his. If you open that envelope tonight, you won't have 3 days left. She stepped inside, glancing once at the street before pulling the garage door halfway down. Rain smell clung to her jacket. Eli's mouth was dry. Who are you? She ignored the question, looking at the half-finished shoes on the bench. You're making the wrong pair. That was the first crack, the first shove past his control. What the hell does that mean? He snapped. It means, she said slowly, that they're not buying your shoes. They're buying you. And she, the woman's lips curled like the word tasted bitter, knew you'd never sell yourself on purpose. Eli stepped back. His chest was tight, but anger felt safer than fear. Where is Taya? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her jacket and slid something onto the bench, a USB drive wrapped in blue thread. She told me to give you this if things got bad. They're worse than bad now. Eli's fingers closed around it before his brain caught up. Why didn't she come herself? She's not allowed, the woman said. Her tone carried the kind of finality that didn't invite more questions. But Eli had too many to hold in. Not allowed by who? That was when the headlights returned, 2 cars this time, idling at the curb. The woman's eyes flicked to the shadows under the garage door. They're early. She pushed him toward the back door, hard enough to knock over the stool. Don't take your van. Don't go to Jamal. Drive until your phone dies, then drive more. Eli hesitated, looking back at the envelope in the drawer. She saw it too. Leave it. No. He yanked it out, shoving it into his backpack with the USB. Her jaw tightened but she didn't argue. The back alley was slick with rain. They ran, shoes slapping water, breath harsh in the night air. At the corner, she stopped, pulling a folded map from her pocket, paper, hand-marked in red ink. This is where you'll get answers. But only if you make it before they do. She stuffed it into his hand and sprinted the other way without another word. Eli stood there for a second, map in one hand, backpack strap biting into his shoulder. The cars at the curb started moving. He ran. The city blurred past, streetlights, shuttered shops, the smell of wet asphalt. Every block felt louder, every shadow deeper. He didn't look back until he hit the interstate. And even then, he couldn't tell if the headlights in the distance were random traffic, or the same ones that had been waiting outside his garage. Her voice was steady, but her eyes wouldn't meet his. If you open that envelope tonight, you won't have 3 days left. She stepped inside, glancing once at the street before pulling the garage door halfway down. Rain smell clung to her jacket. Eli's mouth was dry. Who are you? She ignored the question, looking at the half-finished shoes on the bench. You're making the wrong pair. That was the first crack, the first shove past his control. "What the hell does that mean?" he snapped. "It means," she said slowly, "that they're not buying your shoes. They're buying you." And she, the woman's lips curled like the word tasted bitter, "knew you'd never sell yourself on purpose." Eli stepped back. His chest was tight, but anger felt safer than fear. "Where is Taya?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her jacket and slid something onto the bench, a USB drive wrapped in blue thread. "She told me to give you this if things got bad." "They're worse than bad now." Eli's fingers closed around it before his brain caught up. "Why didn't she come herself?" "She's not allowed," the woman said. Her tone carried the kind of finality that didn't invite more questions. But Eli had too many to hold in. Not allowed by who? That was when the headlights returned, 2 cars this time, idling at the curb. The woman's eyes flicked to the shadows under the garage door. "They're early." She pushed him toward the back door, hard enough to knock over the stool. "Don't take your van. Don't go to Jamal. Drive until your phone dies, then drive more." Eli hesitated, looking back at the envelope in the drawer. She saw it too. "Leave it." "No." He yanked it out, shoving it into his backpack with the USB. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. The back alley was slick with rain. They ran, shoes slapping water, breath harsh in the night air. At the corner, she stopped, pulling a folded map from her pocket, paper, hand-marked in red ink. "This is where you'll get answers. But only if you make it before they do." She stuffed it into his hand and sprinted the other way without another word. Eli stood there for a second, map in one hand, backpack strap biting into his shoulder. The cars at the curb started moving. He ran. The city blurred past, streetlights, shuttered shops, the smell of wet asphalt. Every block felt louder, every shadow deeper. He didn't look back until he hit the interstate. And even then, he couldn't tell if the headlights in the distance were random traffic, or the same ones that had been waiting outside his garage. The highway bled into side streets, then into roads so dark the dashboard felt like the only light in the world. Eli drove until his phone battery dipped to 1%, then pulled off at a nameless exit. He killed the engine and sat in silence, listening to the tick of cooling metal. The envelope in his bag felt heavier now, like it was leaning toward him, daring him to open it. Instead, he pulled out the map. The paper was soft from folding, the red ink still sharp. It wasn't a street map. It was a floor plan, one level, narrow rooms branching off a central hall. No labels, just a single circle in the far right corner. Beside it, a time, 9:45 p.m. No date. No explanation. A flash of blue caught his eye. Across the empty parking lot, under a dead street lamp, stood the blue hoodie woman. Not moving. Not hiding. Just there, watching. Eli's hand went to the door handle, but then the hoodie turned and walked into the shadows. By the time he stepped out, she was gone. Back in the car, he turned the USB over in his fingers. Blue thread, tied in a clean knot, Taya's way of marking something as hers. He thought about plugging it into the dashboard port, but the woman's warning echoed in his head, worse than bad now. A car passed, slowing just enough to make his stomach knot. He started the engine and kept driving, following the map's vague lines as if they were actual roads. Hours blurred. At dawn, he pulled into a diner whose sign buzzed faintly in the gray light. The waitress poured coffee without asking, slid a plate of toast toward him. Halfway through the toast, his phone buzzed, unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. A voice he didn't recognize said only, "You have one of two things we want. Bring both, and maybe you'll see her again." Then the line went dead. He stared at the phone until the screen went black. Both. The envelope and the USB? Or the USB and him. He left a few bills on the table, drove again. By nightfall, he found the building from the map: brick, shuttered windows, no sign. The floor plan burned in his mind as he stepped inside. Empty hall, dusty air, his footsteps echoing too loudly. At the far right corner, where the circle had been drawn, a single chair sat under a bare bulb. On the seat, another Polaroid. Him. Taken from behind, at last night's market. The blue hoodie in the frame, just over his shoulder. Eli stared at the Polaroid, the edges curling slightly under the heat of the bulb. The blue hoodie wasn't just watching him, her eyes in the photo were locked dead on the camera, like she'd known the picture was being taken. Like she'd wanted him to see it. He turned it over. This time, no cryptic note, no threat. Just a date, tomorrow, and a location scrawled in blue ink. A location that made his stomach twist, an address he knew by heart. His father's old shoe repair shop. Closed for 12 years. The air in the building felt thicker. He shoved the photo into his pocket and turned to leave, but the hall was no longer empty. Leather jacket. Same slow, deliberate walk, boots echoing off the dusty floor. "You're late," the man said again, same tone as at the market. But this time, his eyes flicked to Eli's backpack. "You brought them." Eli tightened his grip on the strap. "What happens if I don't give them to you?" The man smiled, not friendly. "You won't have to wonder long." From somewhere deeper in the building came the faint scrape of shoes on concrete. More than one pair. Eli stepped back, his pulse a roar in his ears. "You think Taya's the center of this," the man said, almost conversational. "She's not. She's just one of the people who made a choice. You're here because of your choice. Years ago. Before you even met her." Eli shook his head. "What choice?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metallic, a shoehorn, old, tarnished. Eli recognized it instantly. It had hung on the wall of his father's shop. He hadn't seen it since the night the shop burned. The man tossed it at his feet. "You've been running from the wrong fire." Footsteps drew closer. Shadows stretched along the walls. Eli grabbed the photo, the envelope, the USB, and bolted for the back door, lungs burning. He didn't stop running until he hit the street, the cool air cutting his face. In his pocket, the Polaroid felt like it was getting warmer. And for the first time, he realized something: the blue hoodie had been in the background of more than just one moment. She'd been there, barely visible, in old photos with Taya. In a picture of his father's shop he'd kept for years. Always watching. Always close. Eli's breath came in sharp bursts as he tore down the block, the tarnished shoehorn cold in his hand. His head was a mess of images: the burned-out shell of his father's shop, Taya's last smile, the blue hoodie in photo after photo, the envelope he still hadn't opened, the USB wrapped in her thread. All of it felt like it was spiraling toward something inevitable. Headlights cut across the street ahead, blinding him. The black sedan from the garage screeched to a halt. The passenger door swung open, blue hoodie. She didn't move toward him, just held the door wide, eyes locked on his. "Get in," she said. Every instinct told him to run the other way, but his feet moved before his brain caught up. The door slammed, and the car surged forward. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of leather and rain. The leather jacket was behind the wheel. "Where's Taya?" Eli demanded. "Alive," the driver said without turning. "For now." Blue hoodie reached into her pocket and pulled out another Polaroid. This one wasn't of him, it was the inside of a bank vault, stacks of cash blurred in the background. In the center, sitting on the floor, was the same shoebox Eli had taken to the market. "You don't know what you built," she said quietly. "And you don't know who you built it for." His chest tightened. Then tell me. The driver laughed once, a dry, sharp sound. We're not here to tell you. We're here to see if you can finish it. The car swung hard onto a narrow side street. Eli caught a glimpse of the address on a passing building, the same one scrawled on the back of the Polaroid from the dusty hall. His father's shop. It stood exactly as he remembered it, boarded up, the faded paint still clinging to the brick. But as they pulled up, the boards shifted. Someone was inside. The driver killed the engine. 2 minutes, he said. You take the envelope, the USB, and the shoehorn. Leave with what matters. If you pick wrong, he didn't finish the sentence. Eli stepped out. The night air was electric. He could hear voices inside, one of them achingly familiar, Taya's. Blue hoodie leaned out the window. Eli, she said, her voice suddenly softer. You've been chasing answers. Just remember, sometimes the wrong answer is the only thing that keeps you alive. The boards creaked. Taya's voice was closer now. He gripped the backpack straps, heart pounding. Whatever was inside, it felt like every question he'd been running from was finally waiting in one place. And yet, something told him, opening that door might only give him more questions. Eli's fingers hovered over the doorframe, the old wood rough under his skin. Inside, footsteps paced. Taya's voice was clearer now, low, fast, threaded with urgency. He couldn't make out the words, but he could hear the weight in them, like every syllable was meant for him. He pushed the door just enough to see the dim interior. The shop looked frozen in time, counters where his father had once worked, the smell of leather and dust thick in the air. A single bare bulb hung over the center table. On it sat 3 objects, a battered shoebox, a black envelope identical to the one in his bag, and the USB wrapped in blue thread. Taya stood on the far side of the table. Her hair was shorter, her eyes sharper. She looked exactly like she had in the Polaroid from the conference, except now, she wasn't smiling. You made it, she said, as if she'd been expecting him right on time. Before Eli could answer, a shadow moved in the corner. Leather jacket. He stepped out from the dark, leaning casually against the wall like he'd been there all along. 2 minutes, he said, echoing the driver outside. Choose. Eli's pulse hammered in his ears. Choose what? Taya's gaze flicked to the shoebox. One of these takes you out of this alive. The other 2 don't. Blue hoodie appeared in the doorway behind him, silent, watchful. She closed the door, shutting out the street and the car and any hope of witnesses. You've been running on half the story, Taya said. They gave you pieces. I can give you all of it. But you have to decide if you want to hear it before you pick. Eli stepped closer to the table. The shoebox looked ordinary, the kind you'd find in any backroom. The envelope felt heavier now in his memory, the USB colder in his palm. Every nerve screamed to ask why, to demand what was inside each, but the leather jacket's smirk said questions weren't part of the game. Why me? Eli asked anyway. Taya's answer came too fast. Because of the fire. The room tilted. The fire. His father's shop. The night everything ended. What fire? Blue hoodie asked from behind him, her voice cutting like a blade. Taya didn't look at her. The one he started. Eli's stomach dropped. The air felt like it had been punched out of the room. He wanted to shout that she was wrong, that he'd been a kid, that he hadn't. Leather jacket checked his watch. 30 seconds. Taya stepped back from the table. Whatever you choose, Eli, you live with it. And you don't get another chance. 30 seconds stretched into something endless. Eli's eyes jumped from the shoebox to the envelope to the USB, his chest tightening until it hurt. Taya's voice cut through the pounding in his ears. The fire wasn't an accident. They told you it was. They told me it was you. But it was them. She nodded toward the leather jacket. They needed your father gone, he was making something no one else could. You were just the loose end. Leather jacket smiled without denial. Loose ends can be useful. And you were. Until you disappeared with the design. Eli's throat was dry. The shoes. Taya stepped forward. Not shoes. What's inside the sole? A tracking chip small enough to disappear in the tread. They wanted to own every step anyone took. Your father refused. I didn't. Her voice cracked. I thought I could control it. I was wrong. Blue Hoodie moved to the table, her hands hovering over the shoebox. I've been trying to burn this tech out of circulation for years. You've been building it faster than I can destroy it. Eli felt the weight of every mile he'd run, every shadow he'd feared. So what's in the envelope? Taya's gaze softened. Proof. Schematics. The last uncorrupted design, the one without the chip. If you take it, you can build something that's yours. And if you take the USB, she glanced at Blue Hoodie. You can take them down. Leather jacket's tone turned cold. If you take either, you won't leave this room alive. The bulb above them flickered. Outside, a car door slammed. Jamal's voice rang out, Eli. And the tension shattered. In the chaos, Blue Hoodie shoved the USB into Eli's hand. Run. Taya grabbed the envelope and threw it toward him. Leather jacket lunged, knocking the shoebox to the floor, the sound of plastic shattering, tiny circuits spilling out like teeth. Eli caught the envelope, clutched the USB, and sprinted for the door. Blue Hoodie stayed behind, blocking Leather jacket's path. Taya didn't move, just watched him go with eyes that said everything and nothing. The night air hit him like a wave. Jamal was halfway across the street when Eli burst out of the shop. And that's when it happened. When he walked in, she gasped, not from fear, but from what she saw in his hands. The envelope, the USB, and the truth she'd been chasing for years. And here's what happened, they ran. Together. Straight into the kind of fight that doesn't end in one night, but it was the first step that was finally theirs.